Welcome to the Autism Advocacy Day. My name is Michael Bohr, and I am Chair of AFAM, Advocates for Autism of Massachusetts, your host today. I would like to welcome those on Zoom and to those watching the event live on Facebook, hosted by the Doug Flutie Jr. Foundation for Autism. I want to thank the ARC of Massachusetts and the Flutie Foundation for providing us the ability to bring this event to you virtually and live from our offices at the ARC in Waltham. The fact that we're gathered together at the ARC of Massachusetts is certainly progress, as we are hopefully on our way back to some form of normalcy. Having said that, we still have a way to go. More important than our ability to gather is the effect the past few years have had on people we love and care about, those impacted by an autism spectrum disorder. A number of day programs have closed or are operating at reduced hours in services, leaving at least 5,000 individuals with a diagnosis either at home or in their residences, unable to access programs at all or with reduced schedules. I've spoken to a number of parents who are frantic as their children are about to turn 22 and enter the adult service system with no idea or guarantees of what, if any, programming and services will be available to them. You'll hear from one of those families this morning, as well as the CEO of one of the premier agencies in the Commonwealth that serves both children and adults with a diagnosis of autism. As a result, we felt it important to make the theme of today's event restoring services and expanding access. At the core of this is most certainly the workforce shortages in the human service space that currently has made it difficult, if not impossible, to return to any type of normalcy. As a parent of a son with autism, I don't, and I know I'm not alone, find it tolerable in any way to accept this as the new normal. I don't find it acceptable that someone can find employment in the fast food industry and be better compensated than the direct care staff that are responsible for my son's or your loved one's health and well-being. We need to work to find a better way to recruit and compensate staff, a better way to accommodate the increasing number of children and adults in need of services and supports, a better way to expedite evaluations for children exhibiting developmental delays that currently have to wait months for evaluative services, something required in order for them to be able to access services. The only way change will occur is with your support and advocacy. Your voice is imperative if we are to make life better for the people we love and who need our support. Hence, that's why we are here today. You'll hear from individuals today who either need help or are responsible for providing and or advocating for that help. But in the end, it will be up to you, to us, to make sure the executive and legislative branches of our state government hear our voices and respond accordingly. Our co-MCs for this morning's event are Jassy Burks-Abbott, self-advocate and advisor to AFAM's executive committee, and Heather Hedges. Heather is first and foremost the parent of a son on the autism spectrum. She also had a baby girl last year. Heather is an Emmy award-winning journalist who anchors the weekday edition of Boston 25 Morning News. Heather joined Boston 25 News in 2012 as a weekend anchor and reporter. In 2017, Heather won an Emmy for her work covering the opioid epidemic. She's also won Emmy nominations in the categories of Best General Assignment Reporter, Consumer Reporter, as well as series and spot news reporting. She also has a particular interest in covering stories about people with autism and special needs. Please give a warm welcome to Heather Hedges.
Thanks, Heather, for that introduction. I'd like to now read a couple of excerpts from my book. I don't remember having much of a reaction. to the news that my mom only had 6 months to a year to live. When my mom told me, my face went completely white. What stands out to me most is my mom's reaction. She turned to me, placed her hand on my back, and said, "Are you okay?" It was a perfect portrait of a selfless mother. My mom might also have wondered, "Will you be okay?" A question asked by many parents of disabled children when they are forced to confront their own mortality. The issue was put most succinctly in the title of a presentation delivered at the 2017 Autism Society of America Conference, Developing a Housing Strategy, because Mom and Dad Living Forever isn't a plan. The highlight of the LEND program was a trip to Washington, D.C. to meet with members of the Massachusetts delegation, our 9 representatives and 2 senators. Leading up to the Hill visits would be the Disability Policies Seminar, a 3-day conference during which we would meet and mingle with LEND fellows from across the country. On the day of the Hill visits, we would be divided into groups of 4 or 5 and given a schedule before being sent off to the offices of 2 or 3 representatives and 1 of the senators. More likely than not, we would be meeting with a congressional aide, and depending on space availability, the meeting could take place in an enclosed waiting area, a small conference room, or a well-appointed office. After a team leader introduced our group, each of us would spend a minute or 2 talking about pieces of legislation that held personal significance for us. And the personal significance was integral to how we would capture the imagination of our listeners. One of the most important lessons I learned from LEND was the value sharing my experience had when communicating with lawmakers. Being able to talk about the particulars of a bill is important, so is having handy fact sheets, statistics, and other supplemental material. However, the most compelling information I had to convey was the impact a piece of legislation would have on a constituent like me. Legislators, no doubt, go to Congress with their own priorities, but they are supposed to represent us, and they very much want to be reelected. Caught up in a storm of requests, obligations, and demands coming from all sides, a legislator may not be sure which way to go. My story could be their compass. Thanks for listening. I'd like now to introduce Maurice Sullivan.
Thank you so much, Jossie. I have to say that your book completely moved me, and especially the part where you encourage parents to really have high expectations and high hopes for their children and adults with autism. And I appreciate you sharing that with us today. I'm actually going to bring up Terry Farrell to read the governor's proclamation because Heather is not with us at the moment. So come on up, Terry.
Thank you, Maura. Autism Proclamation. Whereas autism is a developmental disability that is widespread within the Commonwealth, equally likely to be present in all communities, regardless of their demographic makeup, and whereas it is essential to address the needs of those with autism and comorbidities, including medical and mental health conditions, and whereas autism and research has highlighted the value of early identification of autism in younger children, and whereas the Commonwealth has long provided special assistance to school-age autistic children to be successful despite their learning differences, and whereas autism in adolescence creates a greater need for assistance in making the transition into adulthood, and whereas many autistic adults continue to require throughout their lifetime support in securing education, finding and keeping employment and housing, transportation, and for other needs, and whereas the Commonwealth is dedicated to providing appropriate services to all persons with disabilities to assist them in achieving their personal goals for full inclusion in society and to lead satisfying and productive lives. And whereas the autism community has been united in its efforts to advance for the needs of all individuals with autism, their families and other caregivers, and professionals who provide essential services. Therefore, I, Charlie Baker, Governor of Massachusetts, do hereby proclaim April 2022 as Autism Awareness Month and April 5th, 2022 as Autism Advocacy Day in Massachusetts to raise public awareness of autism and to increase knowledge of the programs that have been and are being developed to support individuals with autism and their families. And now I'm going to welcome Maurice Sullivan again, or Jossie. Thank you.
Maurice Sullivan is the Director of Government Affairs and Health Policy for the ARC of Massachusetts. Her work at the ARC is focused on year-round advocacy across multiple areas: the Department of Developmental Services budget, legislation, policy, advocacy training, and mass health. Maura is also the Director of Operation House Call, a partnership between the ARC of Massachusetts and medical schools. This program teaches young medical professionals essential skills to enhance the health care of persons with autism and other intellectual developmental disabilities. She is AFAM's representative at the State House, advocating for our priorities related to bills, budget, and policy. Maura is also the mother of 3. Her 2 sons have autism. Please welcome Maurice Sullivan.
Thank you again, Jossie. I want to also add that Jossie is a rock star advocate, and we are so lucky to have him as part of AFAM. We're also extremely lucky today to have the Speaker of the House, Ron Mariano, with us. The Speaker is a good friend of AFAM and of the disability community, and we're grateful for his 20+ years of service. And the past 2 years, he's been leading the House and doing it during excruciating circumstances of the pandemic. Thank you for the increases in the DDS budget during this period and the relief through the ARPA funds to help us hang on. I can't thank you for everything, but your commitment to people with autism and their families really brings us hope. So let's go to the Speaker's video.
Hello, everyone. This is House Speaker Ron Mariano. Thank you to everyone at the Advocates for Autism of Massachusetts for the invitation to speak with you all today. AFAM does so much important work, from the effort to ensure respect and dignity for individuals with autism to the work in partnership with policymakers, educators, and medical professionals. AFAM has undoubtedly made the Commonwealth a better place for people with autism and their families. As a speaker, I rely on input from House members when it comes to their respective areas of focus. Representative Gabelli has been a strong advocate for those with autism and developmental disabilities generally. And it's why I'm proud to present him with AFAM's Legislator of the Year award. Representative Gabelli played a significant role in the funding to include $2.29 billion for the Department of Developmental Services in the fiscal year 22 budget, which was an increase of $158 million from the fiscal year 21 budget. It was his hard work that also helped lead to the inclusion of $5 million for the Disabled Persons Protection Commission in our ARPA bill last year. Additionally, the legislature's police reform bill, passed in the late 2020, mandated that police officers be trained on how to handle interactions with individuals on the autism spectrum. That same year, with the help of everyone at AFAM, as well as the ARC of Massachusetts and other advocacy groups, the legislature passed Nikki's Law, which will provide an important safeguard against abuse of persons with disabilities. Each of these accomplishments are examples of how the legislature has been able to work with advocates for the disability community to make Massachusetts a place where individuals with developmental disabilities can thrive. While we have made progress on issues facing individuals with autism and other developmental disabilities, I know there is still much work to be done. However, because of groups like AFAM, I'm confident that we can solve these difficult challenges. So I want to thank everyone at AFAM for inviting me to speak with you all and for all the incredible work that you do. And again, congratulations to Representative Sean Gavley on his richly deserved award. Thank you all.
You get ready. Okay. Representative Garbely, I've been waiting a long time for this. The speaker highlighted your dedicated work, so I'm just going to say from my family and from our community that we are deeply grateful to have you in our corner. You're always responsive, and so often you're the powerful inside voice on our issues on the Hill, and you treat us like a top priority. We are looking forward to the work ahead together, and congratulations on your award, which is courtesy of our good friends at the Flutie Foundation. That is.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sean, I'm also going to give you a copy of Jossie Abbott Burke's book.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jossie, so much. Put this down. Good morning. It is an absolute pleasure to be with all of you here this morning. I am honored to receive the Advocates for Autism of Massachusetts Legislator of the Year Award, and I am so grateful to be your partner at the State House. And I am grateful to AFAM, the Flutie Foundation, the ARC of Massachusetts. This has been a difficult year. This has been a difficult couple of years for families across the Commonwealth who live every day with autism. And you inspire me every day that you're out there advocating on behalf of your loved ones, your neighbors, and all 351 cities and towns. You know, the role of a legislator is to make sure that we build strong safety nets across the Commonwealth, and to make sure that those safety nets can never be torn down. That is our job. And it is the job of those living with autism and their family members and advocates across the Commonwealth to hold their legislators accountable and to educate them. You know, the past 2 years, many safety nets have been tested, but because of our strong resolve, we have come together and continue to demand that we provide services that are essential for those living with autism across our Commonwealth and for their families. I first want to say thank you. I am grateful to Speaker of the House, Ron Mariano, for his presentation today, but I am more honored for his over 20 years of service to the autism community across the Commonwealth and what he has done for people with disabilities across our wonderful state. Even before he was the Speaker of the House, he was leading on these issues. Years ago, even before he was the Speaker, even before he was the Majority Leader, he brought me into his office and we talked about our priorities, and we talked about our shared priorities for advocating for people with disabilities. And he shared with me an incredibly important part of who he is. As many of you know, before Speaker Mariano got elected to the legislature, he was a teacher. And he shared with me many times how he would have students living with autism in his class. And he would share with me how those students inspired him every day. And they serve as the bedrock when he got elected to the legislature of being a champion for those with autism. And I appreciate his video today, but I need to be honest, it is he who should be thanked for all of the great work he has done throughout his career for people with autism and people across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts living with other disabilities as well. This has been a tough 2 years. It has been none tougher than the chairman of the House Committee on Ways and Means, Aaron Michaelowicz. I was elected almost 14 years ago, and at that time, the banking industry collapsed federally, right? And we lost about $5 billion in revenue, and services across the Commonwealth were decimated. Well, over the past 2 years, especially in the early part of the pandemic, our revenues, to be honest with you, they crashed. And the essential programs that so many of us depend on across the Commonwealth were in jeopardy. Well, the chairman, also by the Speaker of the House, Chairman Michaelowicz, really brought everyone together and really focused on the fact that we need to just kind of stand still at the moment and look at our revenues and see if they're going to come back and not make drastic cuts to the safety nets that I talked about earlier, and to see if we could go into our rainy day fund without cutting those services, because he knew directly the negative impact of cutting those services would be for those living with autism and their families. We followed his lead, and we are better than ever in terms of our revenue, and services were not cut. It was because of that leadership of Chairman Michaelowicz. I also want to thank newly appointed by Speaker Mariano this session, preceded by him by our outstanding advocate, Kay Khan, was the new chairman of the Joint Committee on Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities, Michael Finn. Mike has hit the ground running on being a strong advocate for not just those living with autism, but those living with all disabilities across our Commonwealth. He is leading the effort in advocating for strengthening those safety nets and to make sure that families living with disabilities can can flourish in their communities across our Commonwealth. I also want to thank our good friend, Representative Denise Garlick, who is the chair of the Permanent Commission on the Status of Persons with Disabilities. That can't be understated. For the first time in the Commonwealth, we have a permanent commission, a commission that is funded, a commission that is in statute and will never go away. And her leadership is making that possible. Thank you, Representative Garlick. And I also want to thank our good friend, Representative Josh Cutler, who helped make that commission, as well as the advocacy of Representative Garlick, possible. And I want to thank all of my colleagues, all of the staff from the State House who are on this call. But most importantly, I want to thank the individuals living with autism and the families who advocate across the Commonwealth for those with autism. You are the heroes of this day, and I'm proud to be your champion and your partner. We have a strong ask coming up in the next few weeks, right? The House will be beginning our budget deliberations. And that is why today the governor announcing that this is the advocacy day for AFAM, for those living with autism across the Commonwealth. It gives us an incredible opportunity to educate our lawmakers, to speak to them at their coffee hours, on the phone, through email, in any way we can reach them, to let them know what your priorities are, whether it be pieces of legislation or the budget. And because this month the House is debating our budget, we'll be looking to advocate for an increase in the Chapter 257 rate reserve, in supporting our community day work programs, and supporting transportation costs that are affiliated with them. And Chairman Michaelowicz and the other members of the Ways and Means Committee, they get it, because the past few budgets under Chairman Michaelowicz's leadership have been outstanding for people with disabilities. And we know he is going to be aggressive in making sure that we not only keep the safety nets we have for those living with autism across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but that we strengthen them. And we make sure Massachusetts continues to be a place where those living with autism and their families can succeed and live outstanding lives just like their peers. I was elected way back when in 2008. And one of the first votes I ever took was to vote in favor of an act relative to insurance coverage for autism. and I'm proud to work on legislation around autism and the entire spectrum to this day. And with that said, I'm also proud to announce that a bill I filed with my friend Pat Haddad in the House and Joan Lovely in the Senate, an act creating higher education opportunities for students with intellectual disabilities, autism, and other developmental disabilities, was reported out favorably yesterday by the Joint Committee on Higher Education. Thank you to Chair Dave Rogers and Chair Ann Goby on the Higher Education Committee. We're going to get that legislation passed. So today, when you advocate for your lawmakers on the budget or on legislation, remember the goal is to make sure we strengthen our safety nets across the Commonwealth, and that we build a Commonwealth that will support those living with autism, and not just support them, but to make sure that they can flourish here in all 351 cities and towns in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I'm proud to be your partner, and I'm honored by this recognition.
All right, Representative Garbally, thank you so much for all that you do for our families, and that award is so well deserved, and we just appreciate you listening to our family's stories and advocating on our behalf as well. I wanted to introduce myself. I'm sorry for logging in late. My name is Heather Hedges. I'm an anchor here at Boston 25 News, and I actually just got off anchor desk, so I apologize for my tardiness, but we are on the air until 11 a.m., so I was able to get off the anchor desk a little bit earlier than usual this morning. But in case you haven't met me yet, and I really look forward to the day that we can have this event in person again, because I really love connecting with all the family out there. I also am a mother of a child with autism. My son Brooks is 5 years old and in kindergarten. He's going on 6. He's in a sub-separate classroom this year. And I also have a daughter. I just had a daughter last year. She's 11 months old as well. So it's been actually a busy day of news here. I'm just catching my breath right now. Actually, we had a couple of autism stories in the news today. We had a story today about autism burnout, which when I first heard that term, that might be describing what us parents are feeling sometimes, advocating tirelessly for our kids and navigating services and navigating the world of therapies. But that's actually a term about higher functioning individuals with autism and the mental health toll that it can take on individuals with autism trying to conform to society the way society expects them to act. So we actually interviewed an actress on an Amazon show, As We See It, today, who actually has autism, to talk to her about that. We also had a big story in the news today that just broke at 9:30 this morning from Mass General Hospital. In case you haven't heard about this yet, researchers are just publishing information that was embargoed until this morning, that they have found a connection between fetuses in the womb and autism. Specifically, they scanned the brains, did MRI scans of fetuses in the womb, and found before babies were even born, brain differences between individuals who were later diagnosed with autism and those who were not. So, I think it's important in my role here as an anchor to use my platform here as a news anchor at Boston 25 News to help educate individuals about autism and educate the general public who might not know what autism is or what it might look like, what it's all about, in order to help get more awareness and more funding for programs that our children will benefit from. But I think that it's something that isn't limited to a news anchor. I think that, all of you guys out there today, going to talk to your legislators today, it's our role, all of us, to educate everybody in our community, and whether that be on social media, telling friends about what it is like having a son or a daughter with autism, but also speaking to your legislators about ways that they can help, be it the budget or other pieces of legislation that can help our children long term be productive members of society and lead happy and fulfilling lives, which is what all of us, of course, want. So I appreciate you guys all logging on today virtually. And with that, I wanted to introduce our next presenter. Daniel P. Weber is going to be playing some video for us this morning. We're in for a real treat, because he actually composed this music and song during the pandemic while a lot of us had a lot of downtime. And he holds a music performance degree from Gordon College. So impressive. He's a singer, composer, writer, and autism rights advocate. And he wrote a new musical during the pandemic called Unique, a new musical about a 17-year-old autistic poet. And you can learn more about Daniel by following him on social media or by visiting his website, danielpweber.com. But we wanted to give you an opportunity right now to hear Daniel singing one of the songs from Unique entitled The Passions I Had Inside. So here it is.
I wasn't like the other kids who talked without stopping. My English grades were sky high, but my social grades were dropping. Nobody understood why I was quiet all the time. Was being shy and writing stories really such a crime? My writing skills got sharper and I soon became much smarter. But hatred found a way, and so the bullies hit me harder. They shoved me into lockers and they tried to gut my pride, but they could never obliterate the passion I had inside. I spent my days and evenings giving life to worlds of wonder. Their mountains and their valleys made an echo in the thunder. The warriors I dreamt up went to crack a cryptic code while doing battle up against the giants in the road. And after they would face each tribulation and each hassle, they fought a final battle with the dragon of the castle. Believe me when I say the stakes have never been so high. The weapon of my choosing was the passion I had inside. My life's been like a game of dodging fear and shame and finding all the bright spots in the dark. The forks in the road make it hard to crack the code to nailing it out of the park. Maybe one day I'll leave my mark. The only thing that's certain is that you can face the giants. You'll fight this war head on, dethroning all the wicked tyrants. Of course it won't be easy, life is not a simple glide. But you'll be armed and ready with the passion you have inside.
Thanks, Daniel, so much for sharing that with us. That was excellent. That was very inspiring. Now I'd like to introduce John Randall. John has been working in the fields of human services and education since 1988. He began his career providing direct services at Amigo. John was named president and CEO of Amigo in 2008. John has worked in leadership positions in both the private and public sectors. He holds master's degrees in education and public administration. John is a board certified behavior analyst and a licensed applied behavior analyst. He has held advisory and board positions for numerous professional organizations, including past service as president of the Massachusetts Association of Applied Behavior Analysts. He currently sits on the boards of the Association of Developmental Disability Providers and the Council for Autism Service Providers. John has also served on many human rights committees in various capacities. Please welcome John Randall.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I am honored to be addressing this group during Autism Awareness Month. My name is John Randall. I've held the position of CEO at Amigo for the past 14 years. Amigo is an agency that was founded 50 years ago with a mission to serve people with autism with high needs in a variety of settings, meaning schools, residential children's programs, residential adult services, adult day programs, fee-for-service, consultative, and diagnostic services. We currently oversee the operations of over 80 residential homes along with the other service divisions I mentioned. I'm a behavior analyst by training and experience. We make decisions based upon data and trends, so it's tough for me to present without the benefits of charts and graphs. I'll do my best to explain the nature of the work of our frontline workers, the thoughtful care they bring to their work, and the crisis we are currently facing by not being able to bring more people into this field. My career began well over 30 years ago as a direct support professional. The work was challenging but rewarding. My first full-time job paid about $20,000 a year and had pretty good benefits. The workforce has changed dramatically over the course of my career. Unfortunately, the pay for entry-level positions has not kept pace. My words today will primarily focus on adult services. While the entire frontline workforce is underpaid, adult services is by far the least recognized and probably most essential due to the length of time people with high needs will require services, their entire life after leaving school-based services. The demands and responsibilities placed upon this essential group of workers are enormous and have continuously increased over the course of my career. Their responsibilities include implementing and collecting data on fairly complex treatment plans that reduce problem behaviors while teaching alternative behaviors and skills. They are the voice and they are the advocate for the people we support when they cannot express their own needs or wants in common ways. They are mandated to have many trainings, including first aid, CPR, human rights, fire safety training, and medication administration, and physical intervention training, just to name a handful of them. They are expected to keep homes clean, know how to cook meals, maintain vehicles, maintain medical records, and facilitate meaningful relationships for the people they support. Our current frontline workforce is primarily comprised of people of color who have come to this country with dreams and aspirations that we all have for our families. In a time where our state and country is correctly focused on equity and inclusion, it is simply not right that these positions are funded at rates comparable to wages that people could earn in retail, fast food, or stocking grocery shelves. Prior to the pandemic, we were in a staffing crisis. At this point, I don't know what word would better describe where we are now, but without sustained relief, the system that supports our most vulnerable populations is heading to catastrophe. We cannot put our heads in the sand and pretend that everything is okay because short-term relief has been provided. During the pandemic, the partnership with our state counterparts and funders has strengthened. The dialogue and understanding of perspectives has allowed us to continue to provide these essential services in a responsive and nimble way. We have done this with temporarily increased rates and relief from various sources. I know the provider community is grateful for the responsiveness of the public sector, including our elected and appointed officials. Smaller providers that received federal payroll protection program funds were provided short-term relief. Unfortunately, many providers that are mid-sized to large were not eligible for those programs and had to become very creative to maintain services. We have done this by working closely with our advocacy community and public sector counterparts. What you often hear or read about is the workforce shortage that is hitting the retail, hospitality, and food service industries, all sectors that undoubtedly deserve some attention. You don't hear a lot about our workforce. Over the past 2 years, this heroic group has shown up to work in homes, often for weeks at a time, to care for the people we support. They did this knowing that some people were infected with COVID-19. They did this at the sacrifice of their own families. They did this because they truly care for and love the people they support. Many of our staff are now making critical life decisions in terms of their future in this field. They can make a lot more money, get good benefits, and work shorter hours going to work for the Amazons of the world or in the other sectors. They are thinking about this because they are tired. Most providers like Amigo do a pretty good job finding ways to recognize their workers, but recognition needs to be paired with living wage increases. The funds from the state and federal relief programs during the pandemic have gone into the pockets of this workforce. Without sustained rate adjustments, they are going to continue to leave, and it will become more difficult to recruit the right, caring, and compassionate people into the field. This workforce crisis is happening when the need for services is increasing dramatically. High-need people are entering the adult service system at a time that most providers are hesitant to expand programs due to this unprecedented staffing situation. There's a lot in the news, rightfully, about the prevalence of autism. There isn't a lot that is heard about what happens as this population ages out of school programs or where the higher need people are supported after leaving school. For many, intense, lifelong services are required. The people that provide these services deserve a living wage that doesn't require them to routinely work 60 or more hours a week and work multiple jobs. We can work to change the status quo of this workforce. Hopefully, the partnerships and relationships that have strengthened over the past few years will translate into transformative changes in the way our frontline workforce is perceived and recognized. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak during a month that recognizes the autism community. Please recognize not just the people and families that are impacted, but also the people that provide the supports. Thank you for listening to this perspective.
Good morning. 22 was the number we heard so many times on our journey with autism. For us, it was never an easy topic to discuss. It was the dreaded number. We always said, we'll deal with this when the time comes, and now the time is here. From the start of COVID in 2019 until 2022, there will be about 5,000 individuals transitioning to adulthood, and my son is one of them. Ben turns 22 in May. Right now, we should have a day program in place for him. He should be starting his transition to his new program with his one-to-one to help him have a successful transition. However, due to COVID and due to the workforce shortage, which is at crisis, there is now a waiting list to get into programs because almost every individual with autism who aged out from 2019 they're all still waiting to get services. As you know, people with developmental disabilities thrive with services. And to say my son regressed is an understatement. He had no school for over a year. Well, he had remote learning, which he was not able to participate in. He was very isolated and he could not go out in the community for over a year because he could not tolerate wearing a mask. My son Ben has low functioning autism. He is nonverbal with very limited communication on his iPad. He was diagnosed with a seizure disorder in December of 2020. He is considered a priority 1 case. He needs help with every daily living task. He is not fully toilet trained. He does not have many leisure skills, and wearing a mask was just not happening. He is a big guy, and he can be intimidating. He does have some self-injurious behaviors, and he can be aggressive to others. To find adequate staff is an understatement. It's just a huge challenge, especially now that he's older. Thankfully, I'm able to work from home and did not have to quit my job to care for him like so many families I know. I'm a single parent now, and finding balance during this time is beyond difficult. I lost my husband in 2013 to an accident, and he was Ben's best friend. Ben was devastated, confused, and angry. He would not go outside for over 2 years. My husband's friend came over every morning to help me get him ready for school and get him on the van because he was so aggressive to me during this time. A lot of regression took place during those 2 years. As time went by, Ben got used to his new normal, and the spark in his eye came back and his behaviors decreased. He became more manageable for me. I think the tragedy in some way helped us prepare for the COVID-19 pandemic. So here we are, it's 2022, and Ben will be done with school in 5 weeks. My DDS social worker told me there isn't anything open for you to visit. We cannot open a lot of these day programs because we can't staff them. For example, he told me they hired 5 people a few weeks back. 1 person showed up and quit the same day. And they also took a staff that was already presently there, and they went to work for Target, making more money. Direct service providers are currently making a couple dollars over minimum wage. To me, this is one of the most difficult jobs with our most vulnerable population. The programs will not reopen if they can't be staffed. The budgets allocated for each program needs to be increased. Thank you for the opportunity to share my story.
Well, thanks, Tina, for sharing your story about Ben. Now let me introduce Jennifer Dronin. Jennifer Dronin is the mother of 2 boys with autism. She has been an advocate for equity in both education and healthcare for neurodiverse people, including being an instructor for Operation House Call. She is a registered dietitian and provides nutrition consultation to Inclusive Fitness, a gym for neurodiverse people.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Jennifer Drowan. I have 2 boys on the autism spectrum. One of those boys has a coexisting mental health disorder as well. This is not something that's rare. About 80% of people on the spectrum have some sort of coexisting mental health issue. I wanted today to talk to you a little bit about our journey through the mental health system, having a child with autism, and our experience here in Massachusetts. My son's first psychiatric crisis was in 2018. We were no strangers to medical care here in Massachusetts, and particularly a hospitalization. We had never really had any kind of problems because our child had autism. But that's when we really found out the disparity between medical health and mental health. My son was able to be at home while we did a bed search, and after 4 weeks, he did not have a bed. We then separated ties with Mobile Crisis and did some research on our own. What we found out was really disheartening, that Maine, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island all had care, mental health care, particularly for kids on the spectrum, but Massachusetts did not. So we made a decision to have my son do a partial hospitalization program in Rhode Island. I unfortunately had to quit my job and drive him to and from Providence every day for 4 weeks. Unfortunately, that's not where our psychiatric crises end. In 2020, we had another one, and unfortunately, my son could not board at home. So we made the very difficult decision to go to the ER. We had a 5-day stay, and we finally received a inpatient bed. After he was transferred to that facility, after talking to the doctors, the nurses, and some of the staff, it was very clear that this was not a place that was autism friendly. Their model of group therapy was very difficult for our son, and can be for kids and adults with social and communication deficits. He was also grouped in into groups with age-related peers, and he was not at developmental level as those kids. So unfortunately, he came out of the hospital no better than when he went in. In 2020, we had 3 more inpatient boarding experiences. One was 7 days, one was 14 days, and one was 23 days. At the 23-day mark, we had called legislators, we had called DMH, we had called the Executive Office for Health and Human Services, and they were able to help us secure a bed for our son. Unfortunately, as you can imagine, the director of that program was not happy to be told that she had to take this case, knowing that they were not equipped to deal with a child with autism. So we were unfortunately retaliated against, and despite knowing his diagnosis, his developmental level, his cognitive ability, we were told that their lawyer had let them know that he could sign himself out in 3 days. I don't know if you can imagine how many inpatient psychiatric beds that we were denied prior to that. One of the hospitals in Massachusetts, one of the leading hospitals of psychiatric care in the United States, if not the world, the gold standard of psychiatric care, as they tout on their website, told us that our son was too acute to be able to attend their program. Now, this didn't make sense for us at all. And as you can imagine, if you are going to, say, a center of excellence for cardiology, and you have a medical crisis like a heart attack, you would be really dumbfounded to hear that you were too acute for that particular program. It would have been more honest for them to say too much autism. We have had a really, really difficult journey and are really fearful for the future. Obviously fearful because if we have a psychiatric crisis again, our son really has nowhere to go. During the pandemic, we were told that the out-of-state psychiatric hospitals were not taking people out of state because of COVID. So we were really left with a very, very small pool of places that would even accept him. I'm just urging you to really look at our mental health care system for kids and adults with autism and really need your call to action for this. This is not going away. This is not getting better. There are people waiting over a month to get psychiatric care. And really, unfortunately, people have nowhere to go. So I would really like to ask for you to find ways that we can be creative and getting our loved ones psychiatric care. I thank you so much for your time.
All right, Jen, I've had the pleasure of speaking with Jen before, and you are such a fierce advocate for both of your sons. So, Jen, we really appreciate you sharing and being so honest with something that was obviously so personal and just so awful that you've had to go through. And I truly thank you, and we're sending our love to you and your family. I wanted to turn things back over again to Maura once again to go through now the big legislative priorities that AFAM and the ARC are trying to move forward on Beacon Hill right now. So these are really the priorities that I want to be talking to our legislators today. So Maura, take it away.
Thank you so much, Heather. I just want to say how grateful we are to have you. You are just clutch for our community, and I just love you. So thanks for being here again. And thank you to Jen. I am so happy that you will be sharing your family's experiences with our medical students through Operation House Call. Okay, now we will have our call to action, and I'm going to repeat a lot of things that our wonderful speakers have said. But first, I want to say I'm incredibly lucky to advocate on behalf of AFAM and on this community, and of course, on behalf of my own two boys, Neil and Tyler. So I'm really inspired by our speakers and also from what I'm hearing from our legislators on Beacon Hill. Thank you to our champions who are going to bat for us. There's too many to name, but you've recently renewed my hope and strength with your strong support. But if you're listening and you haven't made our priorities your priorities with leadership, please hear me now. Thousands of adults with autism are home. Our safety net is not functional. The effects on those with autism and other marginalized identities is severe. I'm reminded daily of the incredible resilience of individuals with autism and their families, but this is a perfect storm. Lack of attention over decades to human service wages, the pandemic, the rise in salaries in other fields, and there are plenty more factors crushing in on us. A crisis is defined as a time where a difficult or important decision must be made. We are overdue for this decision, and we must break through the bias that exists, and we must start valuing people with autism enough to make sure they are safe, included, and have opportunities to thrive. The single most important way we can do this is to actually pay their workforce an equitable wage. We need this overdue increase in Chapter 257 of $350 million to bring our direct support workforce from just $16.79 per hour to $20.30 per hour. Alyssa, will you go ahead and share my slides so we can talk a little bit more about the DDS line items and some very important legislation? Okay, before we get into the detail, I don't want to leave the topic of the workforce. I want us all to remember that those DSPs that worked with people with autism before the pandemic, through the pandemic, and are still with us today, they are our heroes. And they're also the lucky ones that have found out that a hard job can be one of the most rewarding. And I hope that they all feel our deep appreciation today. Part of our workforce ask also includes making the 10% ARPA increase, that's the American Rescue Plan Act, permanent for Mass Health Day Habs and for AFC, adult foster care. Adult foster care workers were neglected during the pandemic, and rehabilitation workers have some of the lowest salaries, but they care for our most complex individuals. So let's move on to those familiar line items that we talk about every year. And I won't take you through each in detail, but we're thankful to the governor for his increases in family support and in turning 22. But we asked the legislature to fund our day in employment and transportation line items so that we can get people back to services and employment and family back to their jobs. We need more funding to support children and adults with autism and their families through the Kids Waiver, the DESE DDS program, and the Adult Autism line item. We need technology more than ever. Our line item increases total nearly $70 million. And this is what's necessary to end wait lists and get our safety net functioning again. And selfishly, I have to add that the lack of services has crushed our parent and family caregivers. My cohort is in trouble with stress-related illness and exhaustion. Let's not ignore this any longer. So our ask is a little bit more complicated this year, and let me tell you why. We need transferability between the line items. With the uncertainty of COVID and the workforce, we want monies to go where they can best be used, back to families, for example. And we also want families to have more flexibility with their funds. And finally, let's pay family caregivers for doing this work and for wanting to do this work. They have been our workforce forever, and it's time for equity. Okay, I'm running low on time, and we are actually running tight on this legislative session. And we really want to pass some bills, right? So let's start with expanding on the two bills that we passed in the last 2 years. Let's expand the abuse registry to cover rehabilitation and expand our police training to cover veteran officers and include the blue envelope for safer traffic stop interactions. You heard about Operation House Call. We must train our new generation of doctors and better equip hospitals to treat patients with autism. Thank you to Rep. Sean Garbely for his commitment to this bill. And these bills wrap up AFAM's priorities. So thank you again to Rep. Garbely for championing the Higher Education Opportunity Bill, and that was great news to hear today. And thank you to our past Legislator of the Year, Representative Christine Barber, for her work on these three bills: medically necessary ABA for adults on Mass Health, accessory dwelling units or in-law apartments for people with disabilities, and ensuring dependent insurance coverage. So now my time is really up, but let me finish by reminding you that much of our community is unable to be here today or to even ask for help. They are just surviving. But today we are speaking for them, and all of this is in your hands. Advocates, contact your reps and senators. Legislators, we know you are stretched with asks, but this is about human rights, and this is a moral responsibility of the lawmakers of the Commonwealth. Thank you to the hundreds of advocates out there. Don't give up. There is opportunity here, and we're in this together. So I wish you all peace and good health, and I will send it over to Michael now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mara. Well, this wraps up our Autism Advocacy Day for 2022. First, I want to thank Jassy and Heather, who are our co-MCs. I want to congratulate Representative Garbely on his award, and I want to thank Speaker Mariano for his words, and I want to thank all our speakers and our vocalists. I think it's a great morning. You know, this is a good event. It's a terrific event, but the real work starts after this event is over. We need your advocacy. We need your help. That's the way things happen. And trust me, representatives and state senators, listen, when you call, they pay attention. When they get multiple calls, they really pay attention. So please take the time, read our legislative and budgetary priorities, and call your state rep and your state senator and advocate on behalf of the families and individuals that we love and care about. Everybody stay safe and be well. Thank you.